Throughout the history of the ancient Near East, Mesopotamia shared political and cultural dominion of the territory with another great power, Egypt. Because of the many local variations between different major sanctuaries in Egypt, presenting a synthesis of the Egyptian pantheon can be challenging. The gods often changed function, representation, and even name, as the Egyptians merged the traditions of different cities to create an impression of mythological and political unity. Despite this, we can try to synthesize the Egyptian vision of the cosmos and world to better understand sexuality. The Egyptian pantheon was governed by an assembly of 9 gods, led by the protective deity of the sanctuary. Each sanctuary had its own leader, such as Thoth in Hermopolis, but the 7 other surrounding gods varied from one location to another. The most well-known is the Heliopolitan pantheon as presented on the screen. In the Ennead, which was a group of 9 gods governing the Egyptian pantheon, Horus was one of the gods. He was a royal and solar god and the son of Isis and Osiris. Sometimes Seth or Geb was omitted. Like in Mesopotamia, there are different stories about how the world and gods were created, but they shared similar ideas. The most widespread belief was that the universe started as a layer of primordial water, Nun, which enclosed the universe in potential, but could not give life by itself. The sun god or craftsman god created other gods in various ways, like ceramics, expectoration, and masturbation, on the first space that emerged from the unknown. The creator used the force of the spirit to conceive beings and the creative power of the word to bring them into existence. From this, the universe was created and established in a cosmic order that remained throughout its history. The world's order in ancient Egypt was usually disturbed by chaos and evil, which were caused by events or the weakness of humans. No matter what happened, the universe's balance was eventually restored, and the eternal and universal order was present every day. It could be seen in the daily rising of the sun and the cycle of the seasons. Despite the repetition of some events, misfortune was not a predetermined fate that followed a peaceful period. Instead, the established order since the creation of the world remained unchangeable and absolute. The Egyptian universe has a force called Ka, which is present in everything from people to objects. It is an immortal, divine energy that gives life, communicates, and shines. When a person dies, they go towards their Ka, but don't merge into it, so an eternal return is not part of ancient Egyptian thought. The living could communicate and address the dead and ask them for advice through lamentation letters or dream communication, showing how everything is interconnected in this world. Sexuality in ancient Egypt was not considered as something particularly special, but rather integrated into the balance of life in the universe. Unlike in Mesopotamia, there was no goddess equivalent to Ishtar. Egyptian goddesses had roles of motherhood and marriage. However, fertility was considered important in a country that relied heavily on the fertility of the Nile River. Phallic symbolism could be found in fertility rituals to ensure abundant growth. 2 male deities looked after the fertility of animals and plants. Min was dedicated to animals, and Osiris was focused on plant growth and abundance. The goddess Hathor was the only deity solely dedicated to sexuality, as she was the goddess of love and music. Though she was often seen in intimate scenes, she was not associated with sexuality pleasure like Ishtar. If phallic figures were placed in her temples, it was to ensure the fertility of the earth or women and male virility. The god Nain and twin Bes were often associated with Hathor as the protectors of women's intimate lives, represented by oversized phalluses. However, they were minor gods in the official Egyptian pantheon and had no known priesthood, although their cult was prevalent in popular belief. It is unknown if sacred prostitution was present in ancient Egypt, but archaeological and literary evidence suggests that prostitution, as we know it today, existed. Graffiti found in the workers' colony of Deir el-Medina depicted nude women in suggestive positions and lovers in various poses. Medical papyri contained regulations regarding adultery and abortion. These crude but valuable graffiti revealed the dreams and fantasies of ordinary Egyptians. Sexuality in ancient Egypt was not just a private affair, but integrated into the general aspects of life, with moderation advised. It was linked to the idea of renewal and vivification and allowed for the emergence and continuation of life, making it not a trivial aspect in a region reliant on annual land fertilization. Wisdom books recommended fulfilling a woman and advised against giving in too much to sexual impulses. Sexuality could be both beneficial in creating life or destructive, leading to order or chaos. Egyptians did not depict sexuality on tombs or official iconography, due to its potent negative power, as images were magically powerful enough to be uncontrollable. Finding information about homosexuality in ancient Egypt is a challenge because official texts do not mention sexual relations between men or women, and there are no legal texts that discuss homosexual acts. Instead, researchers look at indirect witnesses to gather information, such as myths. One interesting myth is the story of the rape of Horus by Seth, which is part of a larger narrative about the succession of Osiris. In the story, Seth tries to rape Horus, but Horus stops him by retaining his seed in his hands. While this myth has elements that escape us, as the battle between Horus and Seth did not end with this episode, it led to Horus being humiliated to the point where he could not succeed Osiris. This was not because of their homosexual relationship, but rather due to the violent and denaturing act of penetration, taking away Horus' virility. In the negative confession of the Book of the Dead, there is a mention of a same-sex relationship, which is one of the few sources researchers have to understand ancient Egyptian social legislation. In the negative confession, the deceased claims innocence, and that they have not committed any crimes or wrongdoing during their earthly life. I did not impoverish a poor person. I did not commit an abominable act before the gods. I did not harm a slave with their owner. I did not cause sadness or tears. I did not kill. I did not steal from the blessed. I was not a pederast. I did not fornicate in the holy places of the God of my city. Oh, he who proclaims the decision, born of Unsai, I was not insolent. Oh, Bast, born of the Mount, I did not close my eyes. Oh, he whose face is behind him, born of the tomb, I was neither depraved nor a pederast. Oh, the burning one of the leg, born of the twilight regions, I was not false. Oh, the gloomy one, born of darkness, I did not insult. The second part of the negative confession is unclear. The titles of the lines show who the deceased is talking to, but we don't know who they are exactly. So, we're not sure what actions the deceased is denying. The ancient Egyptians consider not having a relationship with a young boy as a virtue. However, this relationship would be unequal because one person is younger than the other. We don't know who the word boy refers to, but it could be a slave or someone with a particular status. It's also not clear what punishment people guilty of this crime would receive. There are few references to sexual relationships between women in ancient Egypt. One reference comes from a dream interpretation book for women. If an ibis has sexual relations with her, she will have a well-equipped house. If a hawk has sexual relations with her, she will have a destiny. If a bird has sexual relations with her, one of her rivals will gain something. If a married woman has sexual relations with her, she will have a bad destiny and one of her children will. If a barbarian has sexual relations with her, he will take her husband and she will be found dead. If a woman has sexual relations with her, it will end badly. It suggests that if a woman has a sexual relationship with another woman, something bad will happen to her. Homosexual relationships between women were frowned upon, perhaps because it excluded men, which was unacceptable in a phallocentric society. While we don't have any definitive evidence of sexual relationships between two men or two women in ancient Egypt, there are some rare images that suggest an intimate bond, with characters holding hands or embracing. The most famous example comes from a tomb in Saqqara that belonged to two high-ranking officials, Khnumhotep and Nyankhnum, who were buried together as husbands. The tomb's paintings also show them in intimate embraces. The image of them at a banquet table is particularly interesting because Khnumhotep is holding a flower that is usually associated with women, while the woman behind Nyankhnum was erased by an artist for an unknown reason. In the second image on the wall of the Chamber of Offerings, two men are depicted intimately. We don't know the true nature of their relationship because there is no explanation. These images suggest more than just friendship and include symbols of eroticism, especially at the banquet scene. Nyanknam is on the right, holding his friend's right arm, while the other arm is tightly wrapped around Nyanknam's shoulders. Their noses touch, and their torsos are so close that their belt buckles seem to join. The images imply that intimate relationships between men were accepted and acknowledged publicly. In another text, dating back to the 24th century BC, Pharaoh Pepi II and a general named Sison are mentioned. The text suggests that one night the pharaoh went out alone, and a man named Teti, the son of Henet, found out and followed him. Teti discovered that the pharaoh had visited General Sison's home. Afterwards, when Pepi II returned to the palace, Teti followed him back. His Majesty, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Neferker, went out alone at night without anyone accompanying him. Teti moved away to avoid being seen. He stayed still and thought to himself, given the circumstances, what they say seems true, he goes out at night. Teti, son of Henet, followed the king closely without scruples to find out why he had gotten up. He arrived at General Sison's home. He threw a brick and hit the ground with his foot, after which a ladder descended toward him. The king climbed up, while Teti remained below waiting for him to come back down. When His Majesty finished doing what he wanted with the general, he returned to the palace, and Teti followed him. When the king entered the palace, Teti returned home. The expression finished doing what he wanted with is not insignificant, as it has a sexual connotation in many texts. It seems that the story of Pharaoh Pepi II tells of a homosexual relationship without this being an abomination. The physical relationship between two men was not condemned, but it was also not lived publicly because the pharaoh had to hide to meet his lover. The status of homosexual relationships in ancient Egypt remains unclear, as there is no hieroglyphic word to denote this type of sexuality. Homosexual acts were not viewed positively, which aligned with the concept of universal order and harmony that governed people's daily lives. Homosexual relationships between two individuals of the same sex were seen as challenging the traditional roles of men and women, which were in accordance with Ma'at. However, indications from iconography and other narratives suggest that homosexuality was tolerated within the private lives of men, who were also expected to fulfill their roles as husbands and fathers.